I'm Vicki Paris Goodman, author of To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. Welcome to part one of my three-part series that will change the way you think about death and loss and will set you on a path to loving life again. Most of us can't wrap our heads around the death of our spouse, the love of our life. For me, it seemed like the end of life as I'd known it. Perhaps the death of a child might be worse, but losing my husband Sam to liver cancer was about as bad a circumstance as I could imagine, or so I thought. I was right about one thing. Sam's death was the end of life as I'd known it, but I assumed that was a bad thing, that my future would never look bright again, certainly not as bright as it had been with Sam by my side. That assumption turned out to be false, utterly and completely false. Almost immediately after Sam died, a very strange thing happened. Apart from the initial shock I felt as I tried to grasp the implications of having suddenly become a widow, I also saw what I'll describe as sunlight breaking through on what I thought would be the cloudiest day of my life, the day Sam died. I experienced a strong feeling that a helping hand was guiding me to circumvent the mental and emotional confusion that normally arises from such a traumatic event. Although I'm not a particularly positive person, I'm sort of middle of the road when it comes to a positive outlook. I was suddenly flooded with optimism. At first, I thought Sam was reaching over from the afterlife to help me. Later, I thought it must be God leading me forward, helping me to see clearly, encouraging me to forego guilt in favor of embracing the possibilities that lay before me. Those possibilities were what I later realized amounted to an exciting plan B for my future going forward. I came to refer to that future as my second choice alternative to the life I'd had with Sam. Thinking back on those initial days after Sam died, I experienced a mix of optimism and bewilderment. I'd met two friends for lunch the very day after Sam passed away. I didn't feel the need to cancel the lunch date, opting instead for the chance to talk about Sam, how funny he'd been, and all of the wonderful ways in which he'd supported me in my various endeavors during our marriage. I thought that would feel good, and it did. But I didn't always feel quite so confident socially in those early days after Sam died. I valiantly accepted invitations from friends and neighbors, even though I wasn't sure I was up to much socializing. I recall a get together at our community pool. I attended the gathering, and even though I was greeted with welcoming friendship and warmth, I only lasted about half an hour. Suddenly feeling overwhelmed, I said goodbye and left for the safety and security of my house, the home I'd shared with Sam. The surprising thing was that the overwhelming emotions and bewilderment I experienced that day turned out to be short lived. I can only say again that I felt I was being guided. My job seemed to be nothing more than to remain open to being led. Given I've always been a bit of a control freak, I was amazed at the trust I was placing so willingly in the hands of an entity whose identity was unknown to me. Was it Sam? Was it God? Was it both of them? Or something entirely different? There is much more. For instance, strange things were happening, things that seemed too coincidental to be mere happenstance. For example, Sam's favorite flower had been sunflowers. A few weeks after his death, I drove to his celebration of life that I would be hosting. There was a little blue car in front of me as I approached the venue. The car had a plastic sunflower sticking up from its roof. The flower was bent back toward me, so I could see it wasn't just any flower, but unmistakably a sunflower. For years, Sam and I had searched for a Star of David for me to wear, but we never found the right one. Just a few days after Sam died, I was in a jewelry store having my watch battery replaced, and I saw the perfect Star of David necklace. The story of how I paid for it is also quite an example of serendipity. And serendipity was playing an outsized role throughout the months after Sam's passing. In my book, To Sam with Love, I tell the incredible story of the colorful presence of Sam's soul most evenings after I got into bed, and how the identity of the apparition, for lack of a better way to describe it, was actually confirmed to be Sam. It's a miracle I could scarcely believe when it happened. The timing alone of many of these curious events seemed serendipitous, to say the least. Up until Sam's death, I'd achieved little more than a rudimentary belief in God and an afterlife. But now, suddenly, I had my belief in Sam's continued existence on the line. I needed increased faith, and I needed it right away. Just as I began to wonder how I would achieve this absolute faith and doubting it was possible, I was presented with the story of a near death experience. It wasn't just any near death experience, but that of a secular neurosurgeon who'd never believed in such things. Upon reading about his experience of the afterlife and his expert assessment that his infection ridden brain had been incapable of such complex images, my faith was virtually transported the rest of the way to completion. I now believed in God and an afterlife and haven't questioned them since. Much of this has enormous implications for how we all view life, death, and God's plan for each of us. And I talk about these important perspectives in much greater detail in episode 2, which you mustn't miss. The crazy thing is, none of this had been on my radar prior to Sam's death. Now it's as if God has chosen me to thoroughly upend the way our culture views these crucial aspects of our existence. And I've seen over and over again that how we view them makes all the difference in the world as to how we move forward into the next chapter of life. The news is just so good, and I want to share it with you. Much of it is in my book, To Sam with Love. Still more is in these episodes you are listening to now. Just wait until you get to episode 2, where some of the most earth shattering revelations with which I was blessed are described in detail. They changed my entire outlook on the reality of having lost the love of my life. To give you an idea of how I moved into my next chapter, let me tell you a little bit more. I'm a violinist, and it seemed like a no-brainer to rejoin the orchestra I'd played in up until we received Sam's terminal cancer diagnosis. So, not every decision was inspired. This one just seemed like a good thing for me to do. So far, so good. But serendipity and inspiration did play a part in some other things I took on. For instance, friends encouraged me to come to karaoke with them. They said I wouldn't have to sing, but that they were inviting me because they thought their karaoke gang would be a welcoming group of people I might like to hang out with. And they certainly were. Some of them are now close friends. What a blessing. But the really cool thing is, it turned out I can sing. Oh, I knew I could carry a tune, but my voice had always lacked power. And so I'd confined my nightingale impulses to the shower and my car. Something happened at karaoke. The more I sang, the more power my voice seemed to take on. It made sense when someone pointed out the voice is a muscle that benefits from exercise. Long story short, I now sing at public events. Singing has enriched my life immeasurably. Around that same time, I received an email from the local community playhouse announcing auditions for a staged reading. I drove to the playhouse for the first of 2 evenings of auditions. I almost left the audition before my turn came. I was so intimidated by those who auditioned before me. But I figured I had nothing to lose by staying. I wound up getting the female lead. I'll be honest with you, I was having the time of my life. But I'd come home after each event or activity or social gathering and feel empty inside. The difference was Sam was gone, and I had no one with whom to share these little victories, these challenges met. Oh, I knew Sam was still with me, which bolstered me daily. But it wasn't the same as having him come to a performance or being able to tell him about it when I returned home. I could have a ball doing the things I'd always enjoyed, trying out new things and meeting new people. I could take adventurous excursions to inspiring places. And I did all of these things and more. Still, I instinctively knew that in spite of it all, something would be missing for a while, and maybe for a long time to come. The takeaway is I accepted that reality and continued on this path of productivity, adventure, acquiring new skills, and making new friends. Frankly, it was working for me, however imperfect it felt. Some people recommended I keep myself so busy I'd have no time to think about the life altering event of having lost Sam. But I ignored their well intended advice. Instead, I'd achieved a balance of activity and alone time. The alone time spent processing the loss. This too was working for me. A couple of years after Sam's death, I finally felt ready to meet a new man. That story is featured at the end of To Sam with Love, and being with my sweet Mike has filled the void I experienced while taking on all of my new endeavors. In writing To Sam with Love, I infused the book with the optimism with which I'd been blessed. I succeeded, judging from comments and online reviews, most of them on goodreads.com and my website, vickiparisgoodman.com. Readers have even described the book as humorous, authentic, sacred, light, and uplifting. I will share some of these testimonials in episode 3, while episode 2 contains those startling epiphanies I mentioned before. Those revelations struck me as messages of divine inspiration. I am simply the humble messenger. When you listen to episode 2, the way you think about death, loss, and God's plan will be turned upside down. Please visit inspiredgrief.com for the best pricing currently available for my book To Sam with Love. You've probably got just a few days left until these 3 pop-up podcast episodes go away forever. But I have a special offer for you. If you buy 2 copies of To Sam with Love, I will give you 2 things. One is my bonus content offer, Solutions for Your Bright Future, which will give you answers to problems that may arise as you embrace your new life. These include a cheat sheet of exciting activities and opportunities to pursue, solutions to dilemmas like how to handle your children's objections to your new relationship, and much more, as well as a personal activity log for you to track your progress. The second part of this bonus offer is lifetime access to this 3-episode pop-up podcast series. You can redeem this offer by going to inspiredgrief.com/offer to submit a copy of your proof of purchase of 2 copies of To Sam with Love. Along with this 3-episode pop-up podcast series you are currently listening to, my book, To Sam with Love, will serve as your roadmap to loving your life again. Thank you for listening.